¿vale? Entonces, eso por un lado, y por otro lado...
The biggest problem is that they choose the lowest bid. That ends up being paid by the worker. Fewer staff, no replacements, more workload.
Entonces, existe una sobrecarga.
Procurement, it's mostly based on the cheapest offer, and this will affect the cleaners because they have to do the same amount of work in shorter working hours.
One day, you have a job. The next, everything changes. A new company takes over. Your pay drops. Your hours shrink. Your future feels uncertain. This isn't just bad luck. It's the result of a series of decisions made elsewhere, in the EU's political headquarters in Brussels, across European capitals, and procurement offices, through bidding wars, and in contracts focused on profit over people. Rather than employing cleaners directly, many public institutions such as hospitals and schools, as well as companies in the private sector such as banks and car factories, outsource cleaning work through public tenders. If done well, it can guarantee decent working conditions. But too often, the ultimate decision on which company wins the contract bid is driven by one thing: the lowest possible price. But when the cheapest bid wins, who really pays the real cost? Welcome to Unsung Cleaners, a podcast where Europe's cleaners tell their stories in their own words. I'm Gail Rego, the host of this podcast, and together we'll go on a journey to uncover the essential yet often invisible role that cleaners have on our everyday lives. Across Europe, schools, hospitals, airports, and government buildings, our most essential public spaces, rely on cleaning staff to be able to function. But in many places, these essential services are performed by workers who are not directly employed by the company on whose premises they work. They're outsourced to private companies. When public bodies such as schools, hospitals, governments, or airports contract workers in this way, it is usually called public procurement, where government bodies hire companies through competitive tenders to provide services like cleaning, catering, security. At first glance, it looks like a way to save public money. But when the main criteria for awarding a contract is the lowest possible price, there are consequences, especially for the workers at the end of the chain. Cleaning companies undercut each other to win the contract, and once they do, there's only one place left to cut costs: the paychecks of the cleaners themselves. Wages are slashed, hours drop, workloads rise, and the result is what many in the industry call a race to the bottom, also what's known as contract flipping. When a contract changes hands, sometimes every few years, the cleaner's job doesn't necessarily disappear, but their employer does. They often have to start relationships from scratch. New management, new conditions, less stability. So why does this happen? Since the 1970s, there's been a global push to outsource public services, not necessarily to improve quality, but to reduce labor costs and staff. That strategy has shaped how the cleaning industry works today. Efficiency has become a code word for cheap labor, and often public money, which comes from our taxes, is used to finance this exploitative cycle. But there are better alternatives. Fairer models for procurement already exist. The UNI Europa campaign advocating for fair work within public contracts, called No Public Contract Without a Collective Agreement, for example, illustrates how public institutions ought to set the bar and labor and contractual policies to ensure decent wages, job security, and respect for collective agreements whenever they award cleaning contracts. But how do these principles play out in real workplaces? And what does it take to make them a reality? In this episode, we meet two cleaners, Niina Autio in Finland and Natalia Higueras Lopez in Spain, who have both experienced the effects of this system firsthand. We'll also hear from Dr. Karin Gerling, a labor researcher who explains how public procurement policies can protect workers, and from Joost Engelaar, a union organizer in Belgium, who shares what it takes to actually win fairer contracts. Our first interview is with Niina, a cleaner from Finland who has spent a decade cleaning public buildings like schools, museums, and police stations. As a team leader, she's seen firsthand how constant contract changes ripple to her workplace. Niina, how did you become a cleaner?
I started as a summer job to me, and I was a summer worker in the cleaning company. And after that, I decided to become a full-time cleaner. I was in the school environment. We were doing like this basic cleaning services during that time.
You've worked on public contracts. Could you tell us how that process works?
Yeah, well, in Finland, we basically have this contract period, which is mostly around 3 years. And after that, the public service subscriber will have a bidding, and the employers in different companies will join to the bidding. And there is sometimes the point where the company will change if it doesn't win the contract.
Have you experienced this change yourself?
Yeah, actually, there was a bidding in the end of the year 2024, and our contract started in the beginning of the 2025, and we were the new company to join this clientship. It is quite helpless situation. You have to start in the new customership, and it is all new things that you have to learn, new habits that the customer has. But it's also quite refreshing after you start in the new place.
But does this refresh come at a cost, not just for the cleaner, but also for the entire team?
I think that there is a big change, because some of us will continue with our employer, and some of us will need to find a new employer. So it will break the teams. Me myself, I haven't lost a job, but I have lost team members a lot, and it is quite sad because you have the colleague is also your friend, and it feels like you lost your friend during that time.
Do you think changing contracts impacts workers' rights, Niina?
In my cases, it doesn't have had any effect, but I know from the colleagues that some of them has lost their negotiated salaries. We have in collective agreement the minimum salaries, but if the worker has negotiated some personal allowances, for example, they will lost those in the contract changes. And also the collected holidays and that kind of things, they will lose them when they change to another employer.
Who generally wins these public contracts?
Procurement, it's mostly based on the cheapest offer, and this will affect the cleaners because they have to do the same amount of work in shorter working hours.
Can you tell us what the impact of that pressure is on cleaners?
It will affect how the cleaner will see her work because you will have this like ethical stress. You have to decide what job you leave undone so that you can meet the requirements.
Niina, if you could put one non-negotiable rule in cleaning contracts, what would that be?
I think that would be that the service provider must comply with the collective agreements and also the labor legislation.
And what's your message to the people using the buildings that you clean?
Well, one message is that cheapest offer is not the best offer because you won't get good quality based on the cheapest offer. Many of cleaners are feeling exhausted, and I have heard that many of cleaners have think about to change to other jobs, leaving the cleaning work.
Niina's story from Finland shows a troubling contradiction. A system meant to improve efficiency ends up creating stress, instability, and burnout. Unfortunately, in parts of Southern Europe, the race to the bottom is much worse, with deeper impacts on job security. In Spain, Natalia has been a cleaner for over 18 years, always working on outsourced public contracts. Her story shows how the logic of choosing the lowest bid plays out in a country where temporary employment is the norm. Natalia, do you generally get any feedback or appreciation for the work that you do?
No, en limpieza no es habitual recibir halagos por el trabajo.
In cleaning, it's not common to receive praise for the work. You receive more complaints than praise, to be honest.
Considero que ha sido un trabajo que...
I see it as a job that, during the pandemic, was very important, essential even. But today, it's still seen as bottom of the pyramid work, something nobody wants to do, and that's quite frustrating.
Pues eso, un trabajo de base de pirámide que nadie quiere realizar, por lo tanto es bastante frustrante.
Natalia has many years of experience, not just with cleaning work itself, but with the system behind it, public procurement.
Yo sé, todos los años que llevo trabajando en limpieza...
All the years I've worked in cleaning have been under public contracts, what we call here outsourcing of the service. That means I work in a public institution, but I'm employed by a private company. This way of organising cleaning work is very common in Spain.
La metodología es bastante habitual en limpieza y en España.
Natalia, how would you explain public procurement in Spain?
Los contratos públicos son los contratos que hacen las...
Public contracts are the contracts that government entities make with private companies. That is, a job that is done in a public centre, instead of doing it with their own staff, which in Spain is civil servants, they outsource the service. They bring in a private company that comes in and is in charge of that service.
Privada, que es la que entra y se encarga de ese servicio.
Here, this is very common, especially in sectors like cleaning, and even gardening now. In healthcare too, for example, there are hospitals with private management. So when it comes to cleaning, I would say there are almost no public centres left with in-house staff. And where there still are, those roles are gradually disappearing as staff retire.
Los están quitando, según se va jubilando el personal.
But there are additional challenges to having decent working conditions in Spain. The structure of the work itself, especially part-time and temporary contracts, creates a whole new set of problems.
Mi contrato es que llevo trabajando...
In cleaning, the biggest problem is part-time work. Very reduced hours. There are very few full-time jobs.
Contratos temporales.
Natalia, what would you say are the impacts of part-time contracts on cleaners?
Pues una inestabilidad económica.
Well, economic instability and lack of work-life balance. To have a reasonably decent salary, I have to work several jobs. And another problem is that women still earn less than men, so we end up being the support salary for the household.
El salario de apoyo a la casa.
When you think about public cleaning contracts, what do you see as the biggest problem with the way that the tenders are awarded?
A ver, si no eres a nivel individual...
The biggest problem is that contracts are awarded to the lowest bidder. And in the end, that cost is carried by the workers. Fewer staff, no replacements when someone is on sick leave, and a heavier workload for everyone else. On top of that, there's the issue of price de-indexation. If wages or the cost of living go up, the value of that contract doesn't increase. So companies try to make up the difference by putting more pressure on workers.
Para poder echar una mano y poder combatir un poco estos abusos, porque bajo mi punto de vista es eso.
What toll does that take on your physical, emotional, and mental well-being?
Un cansancio generalizado al final. Tienes que cumplir.
Chronic fatigue. You're expected to clean more and more spaces in the same amount of time. In the end, you either stop and say, I'll do what I can, or you push yourself under pressure, and that really takes a toll. It affects your health, and many people end up going on sick leave.
Bajas por enfermedad, por supuesto.
How does the impact of these temporary contracts, these exhausting schedules, how does it impact your ability as a worker to even have the time and energy to organize?
Si tuviese que hacer una distinción,
In workplaces where there are many workers, you can build unity more easily. But if there are only one or two people, it becomes much more difficult.
Dos personas es más complicada.
I guess the question is the power of unions to change rights for cleaners.
Sí que creo que.
Yes, I do believe in the power of unions, completely. When workers act together, real change can be achieved.
After talking so much about, these different kinds of contracts, public contracts, and the challenges, what is one non-negotiable thing that you would put in cleaning contracts to protect workers like you?
Indexación. O sea, eso lo tengo clarísimo.
De-indexation must end. Contract prices need to rise in line with the cost of living. Otherwise, it's always the workers who end up paying the price.
No tendríamos esa sobrecarga.
From Finland to Spain, both Niina and Natalia show us how public procurement, when driven by cost alone, can unravel stability, dignity, and fair working conditions for cleaners. So what would it take to change that? How can public contracts be used not to erode rights, but to uphold them? Dr. Karin Jährling has spent years studying these questions. She's a labor researcher who examines how public procurement can shape working conditions, especially for outsourced and essential workers like cleaners, and specifically looks at the vital role that clients have in enabling decent work. She has also worked on the successful Procure Fair project with UNI Europa, which has contributed positively to the ongoing policy discussions on public procurement at the highest levels of decision-making in Europe.
A public hospital hires a company to clean the building. That's an example of public procurement. Hospitals, local authorities, and other public organizations are very important customers, in particular in the cleaning industry. So this gives public authorities buying power. They do not just have to buy the services as they are offered on the market. They can also set certain requirements or minimum conditions within the framework of public procurement. And these can also include requirements about working conditions. So even if cleaners aren't directly employed by the local authority, but by an outsourced service provider, the local authority can still have a positive influence on their rights and working conditions to a certain extent. So I would say it's primarily a question of fairness. But if working conditions are not fair, this is not only bad for the employees themselves, but also for the quality of services, for social cohesion, and also quite specifically for the question of who will want to do this hard work in the future. So if we want to avoid dirty municipal offices, nurseries, and hospitals, but have professionally clean infrastructures for all public purposes, then public procurement must also contribute to this via buying decent work. Just writing good working conditions in a contract isn't enough. If you're serious about this, you'll also need to put measures in place to monitor compliance.
As Dr. Jährling makes clear, contracts alone aren't enough. If we want public money to deliver decent work, we need enforcement, strong standards, and political will. And in some places, that change is already underway. In Belgium, a national campaign brought cleaners together and pushed public institutions to take responsibility. Joost Engelaar, regional secretary for Algemen Central ABVV, a socialist national trade union federation, helped lead that movement, showing how procurement can be used not to cut corners, but to build power.
The cleaning sector in Brussels is incredibly diverse. Workers from dozens of nationalities clean large public buildings, the airport, hotels, schools, and countless small sites. Outsourcing and highly competitive tenders create insecurity, changing schedules and high workloads. In the past 10 years, both in Brussels and internationally, we have seen a double trend. On the one hand, greater recognition of cleaning as essential work, especially after COVID. And on the other hand, increasing pressure caused by tenders that focus mainly on the lowest price. Where unions are strong and social criteria are included, we see clear improvements in rights and working conditions. We launched the campaign against the race to the bottom because cleaners in Brussels were repeatedly paying the price of contracts driven solely by cost cutting. A key milestone was the 1st of October 2024, when we brought cleaners from across Brussels together in one big event. A moment of collective strength that made their realities impossible to ignore. We mobilized directly at workplaces, at the airport, in big public buildings, in hotels, in schools, and many smaller sites where people often work alone. This approach helped increase attention for social criteria and strengthen protections during contract changes. It shows that the real change is possible when cleaners stand together and when the clients are sensitized to procure responsibly.
Niina, juggling an overwhelming workload under ever-shrinking hours. Natalia, carrying the constant weight of instability at work. These aren't personal failures. These are the human costs of a broken system, meant to serve the public, but that ultimately only leaves essential workers behind. But as Karen and Joost share, it doesn't have to be this way. Socially responsible procurement isn't just a slogan, it's a real alternative. One where contracts demand fair pay, stable hours, and respect for the people doing the work. And if you're a taxpayer, you have a crucial role to play too. Whether it's at your workplace, your child's school, your regional government. Ask, what criteria are they using to award cleaning contracts? Is it just the lowest price? Or are decent wages, stable jobs, and respect for workers part of the deal? Take a stand and spell it out. Your money shouldn't fund a race to the bottom. Instead, it should help build a foundation of dignity for all workers. Fairer public procurement and contract outsourcing can play a big role in improving working conditions and the lives of cleaners. But they aren't the only thing shaping cleaners' lives. Next time on Unsung Cleaners, we'll talk about the elephant in the room, the intersection of migration, gender, and cleaning work. Why are so many cleaners migrant women? And what risks and lessons come with that reality? This podcast was produced by Sedan Andler for UNI Europa. Interviews and narration by Gail Rego. Special thanks to Alessia Mora, Mark Bergfeld, and dubber Catherine Sean Nelson from UNI Europa, and to all the guests featured in this episode: Niina Autio, Natalia Higueras Lopez, Dr. Karine Jarling, and Joost Engelar. Thank you for listening to Unsung Cleaners, a podcast supported by UNI Europa and co-funded by the European Commission. Subscribe and leave us a review wherever you get your podcasts.